Hello everyone and welcome to Oakwood's Interview the Expert series. I'm Lydia Sirovica, Associate at the firm, and I'm excited to host the first of hopefully many. Today's topic is expert witness reports, and I'm joined by the expert himself, Managing Director Graham Bowcock. Graham is a registered valuer with more than 30 years professional property experience. So without further ado, let's welcome Graham. Good morning, Graham.
Yes.
Are we all set?
I think so, yes, looking forward to it.
Right, so let's get started then. So for our first question, Graham, who requires an expert witness report or valuation?
Well, generally they're required in disputes, particularly those that have gone to court or are going to court. The most common one is matrimonial, i.e. divorce, or partnership dissolution. It could be a civil partnership, it could be a business partnership, and it's where they have, in our case, property that's got to be assessed for value, so it could be divided between the parties in whatever the court determines. There can be other disputes. It could be neighbour disputes, other diminution in value disputes, access arrangements, things like that. But the most common ones that we deal with are related to sort of matrimonial or partnership disputes.
Thank you, Graham. So now we know who requires an expert witness report. Our next question is, what is the status of an expert witness?
Well, an expert witness generally has a duty to the court. We tend to report on two bases, either something called CPR 35, which is the Civil Procedure Rules, or FPR, which is the family equivalent, FPR 25, which is for matrimonial cases. So we have, as I say, our duties to the court, not to the parties. We don't take a role of advocacy. As an expert, we are there to help the court. It may not have got to court at this point, but we're always having an eye to the fact that the case might be getting to court at a later date. So our behaviour has to reflect that.
So, Graham, in terms of the report, what are the ingredients that make up the report?
Well, to start with, it's very similar to a regular valuation. So if we're doing a valuation for secured lending or for tax purposes, the starting point would be similar. We would get all the information together in terms of leases, planning consents, occupancy agreements, and we'd get as much information as possible about the background. We would do an inspection, which wouldn't be a building survey. It's simply, in this case, a measured inspection of the property and general notes about the condition, things that affect value really. And then leading on from that, we would prepare a report. And again, the starting point is very similar to a regular Red Book valuation report, but we have to be more, I suppose, measured about our approach in terms of the advice we give. We have to be an expert, so we can't be a generalist. So we have to make sure that what we're saying is true. And the bit which is added on under CPR 35 or FPR 25 is the statement of truth. There has to be a declaration that what we are submitting is true. So we can't rely on, we have to explain what we've relied on and why we've relied on it and how that's given us the value that we've reported in the valuation report.
So, Graham, you briefly mentioned the data and evidence that are required for the purposes of the report. So are you able to elaborate on how that is collected and processed?
Yes. The key evidence, of course, was in several blocks, but the first, as I say, is the physical attributes of the property, which may be leases, it may be planning consents, everything like that we would gather up. And then moving on to the transactional evidence, which is sales of other similar properties, which we're going to use to advise us or to steer us towards the value of the property. And I think we have a greater duty of care as an expert than when we're doing other reports. As I say, our duties to the court, we have to be correct in what we say. So when we are, for example, obtaining transactional evidence, we need to have good records on our files. who told us the information, what did they tell us. If we're looking at evidence of for example, similar farms or houses that have been sold, we need to know if there's a background to it. Was there a special purchaser, for example? Was the condition particularly bad? Was it particularly... Very analytical about the transactional evidence that we're obtaining, and anything we receive in respect of expert reports, we've got to make sure that it's not being given by somebody who may have a bias to help us. So, for example, if one party is telling us particular features or issues with the property, then we've got to make sure that we are logging those and how we take account of them. They're not to say that they're not correct or we don't or we disbelieve them, but we've just got to be careful how we analyze the information, so over and above evaluation we might be doing for sort of family distribution or taxation purposes.
So there's many layers to it then.
Oh, absolutely, yes, yes.
Now, Graham, I don't believe this will happen all too often, but what does happen if you come across something that sits outside of your expertise?
Well, I think the first thing is we have to identify it. For example, I've had cases where the planning may be complex beyond what I would want to deal with as a valuer. I had one recently where I required the services of an accountant because there became issues about the trading nature of a particular property we were dealing with. So the first thing to do is know your limitations, and an expert must never report as a generalist. If you need an expert, I think you have to hold your hands up and say, I cannot comment on this. And you have a number of options. You could put it in the report, then I'm not going to comment on the planning issues. You can, as a valuer, make assumptions or special assumptions about matters, but by and large, you have to avoid commenting on something where you don't have the expertise. And if you go back to the parties, which might actually involve going back to the court, you might have to say, look, I've come across an issue, and this requires the services of another expert. And on occasions, I've drawn in an expert myself and included their work in my report, or it may be that the parties have to go and get a different report on a particular aspect. So we judge each case on its merits, but the issue is that the expert has to be, that's all. I always keep coming back to the key word as an expert. So you have to be very wary about things which just aren't on your sphere of experience, or something you've not dealt with regularly, or something you've not come across before.
Thanks, Graham. And finally, what is the difference between a CPR compliant and other valuation report? Well, I think it's the barrier of truth, or the level that you've got to get through to submit without labelling the point you are an expert. You have to have the declaration of truth. So you have to believe, not that we disbelieve any valuation we submit, we always have good rationale for it. But there might be different levels of valuation, different levels. It's a bit like, I suppose, in criminal cases, the bar being very high. We have to really set the bar high in terms of the values we are reporting and the reasoning behind it. And as I say, the formatting of the report. So, for example, most of our valuation reports are written in the third party, as in we. There are firms' valuations. The expert's report is written in the first person. It's always me. It's a personal appointment. So that's one significant difference. I am doing this. I was instructed. I've done this. And I have to set out the stages that I have done personally. And then, as I said before, we come up to the declaration of truth, where I have to sign and swear to say that what I've said is correct. And it is possibly contempt of court or perjury if I've misled the court in some way. So it's quite serious that we get it right. So it's just this burden of proof that we have to get through. Thanks, Graham. So that brings us to the end of today's Interview the Expert on expert witness reports. I'd like to thank Graham for joining us today and sharing your professional thoughts on the topic. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you. Thank you. Time for a coffee.
Definitely. And for everyone else, should you require any expert property advice or simply wish to chat to one of the team about any property related matters you may have, then please don't hesitate to call us. It's 0161 941 4228 or email the office at office@oakwoodvaluations.co.uk. Well, we hope you enjoyed this short interview. Stay tuned for our next Interview the Expert clip, which should come around the next month or so. And if you do have any suggestions on topics that you would like us to cover, then just drop us a line and let us know, property related, of course. But for now, have a lovely day. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.